Hi, I'm David Blakesley, and I'm here to talk about Night Moves. This is a new release from the Criterion Collection, spine 1255, released today on March 25th, 2025, as I'm recording this video for you tonight. This is a great movie, one that I was pretty eager to revisit. This one really caught my attention and has been kind of sticking with me as I've revisited it now, watched it a couple times over the past week or so, as it's kind of taking some of the old tropes of the film noir detective, the hard-boiled gumshoe who's kind of, struggling, scraping to get by. He's got his own kind of internal code of honor, but he's a flawed man in a hostile and indifferent world, trying to make sense of some of the craziness that his investigations leads him into to discover as a witness, but also to involve him on a more personal level. So yeah, we see Gene Hackman as a star billing, his name across the top there. Of course, we know that Gene Hackman passed away a few weeks ago under sad, tragic, and somewhat still suspicious and unresolved circumstances. Of course, just a poignant coincidence that this movie was released right shortly after his passing. This was scheduled, of course, months ago. So just a coincidence that these two events kind of coincide, as the saying goes. But you get to really get a sense of Gene Hackman's power as a performer. Here he is in his prime. He's playing Harry Mosby, a retired NFL player. I guess he was an AFL player. He played for the Oakland Raiders in the 1960s, so that was before the AFL-NFL merger that led to the Super Bowl and things of that sort. But he plays a former football player who's now opened up a sort of a one-man private eye shop. He just doesn't seem to be the 9-to-5, sit behind a desk kind of guy, right? But he has enlisted to go find the runaway daughter of a movie actress, a female actor whose kind of best days are behind her. She, she had a little moment in fame and glory in Hollywood, and then she and her husband went on, had a daughter. She kind of retired from the movies. He passed away, left her a trust fund. Actually, they left a trust fund to their daughter, Deli, played by a very young Melanie Griffith. I think she was like 15 or 16 years old at the time, and this young woman is growing up a little bit ahead of the typical schedule there. She's a promiscuous and very headstrong young woman who's decided she just does not want to live with her mom anymore, and she hits the road, destination unknown, and Harry Mosby's task is to track her down, and that's the plot, the driving device of this film, Night Moves. It's an interesting character study. Gene Hackman is a man with conflicted motives. He's going through a bit of a midlife crisis. His marriage is kind of heading into dangerous territory. He discovers very early on in the film that his wife is cheating on him, and he can't quite abide by the fact that the man that she's getting with is almost like his polar opposite. He's a man with a kind of a disability. He walks with a cane. He's more of an intellectual, not really effete or anything like that, but just kind of not the man's man that Harry Mosby is. And so there's a kind of a blow to his pride, a wounded ego that he's dealing with, while he's also going about this job, which seems to offer the promise of some money, but he is definitely not the big breadwinner. He's married to this woman who's an antique dealer. She's apparently making more money than he is, and he's just feeling a little bit diminished and lost without a purpose as he tries to make this detective business sustaining, not only for the finances, but also to give him a sense of purpose and like he's going somewhere. He's got a destination that he's heading toward. And, it's not really working out very well. As his marriage is in trouble, he also finds that this investigation that he's been involved with is getting ever more complicated as things go on. There are shady characters involved in this young woman's disappearance. He finally does track her down. Turns out she's run away to live with her stepdad, and that's not going very well either. There are some plot details I won't bother revealing here if you haven't seen the movie, but basically Night Moves gets pretty complicated, pretty twisted, and leads to a pretty spectacular conclusion after all is said and done. The movie is directed by Arthur Penn, It's a name I knew. I was familiar with Arthur Penn as far as his role in creating films like Bonnie and Clyde and Alice's Restaurant and Little Big Man. Those were kind of the three big titles that he did in the late 60s, maybe early 70s. I think Little Big Man might have been a 1970 or 71 release. And then he took a few years off of making movies, and there's some discussion by him as he was kind of interviewed in 1975 as part of the publicity tour for Night Moves. A very interesting clip that I was very impressed by, just hearing Arthur Penn kind of account for himself, talk about some of his ideas, his goals in making this movie. And he seems like a very bright, very interesting guy. He also had a lot of theatrical experience coming out of the New York theater scene. So a very well-rounded man. And this was the movie that he kind of decided to return to mainstream commercial filmmaking with after taking a few years off in the early 70s. He made this shot it in 1973-74. It was released in 1975, and there were a few people who supported it. It was generally well received. However, he also was questioned by some critics who thought this was kind of a small, and to them at least felt sort of like an insignificant movie for him to come back to after taking several years off. Little Big Man and Bonnie and Clyde were both Academy Award nominated films, and also seen as kind of significant big movies with a statement, with a message. Night Moves is definitely a lot more ambivalent as far as what is it trying to say, or what's the mood or the message it's trying to establish. It's definitely about a man in a midlife crisis who is finding himself kind of disappointed, disillusioned, questioning maybe where his life is heading, and wondering really what it's all about. And the Harry Mosby character, as a former football player, of course, kind of has some of that machismo going on. And that only complicates things because even though he projects power and strength and authority and a little bit of swagger, he's not really feeling it internally. In fact, there's a lot of melancholy in this film. And as a lot of the critics and essays and even Matthew Asprey Gear in his very solid commentary knows, this is kind of that period of post-Watergate malaise and questioning and aimlessness that was happening in the United States right as the election. This was before, of course, the election of Jimmy Carter, but a lot of that kind of desire to get a fresh start, or to, kind of clear away some of the old junk and debris and clutter that has kind of dragged society down, that's kind of coming through. This is not a movie that offers much of a solution or even a bright ray of hope to look forward to or to build upon. It's recognizing the messiness and the complication and the ugliness of what's really going on behind the scenes, the betrayal, the exploitation, the deception. These are the obstacles that Harry has to navigate around as he tries to find this runaway girl, which he does. But even once he finds her, even once he gets her back home, not to give away too much, he finds that her situation is not good, and he has a little bit of complicity in putting her into that situation, which only stirs him up even more when circumstances take a tragic turn, and he finds himself really almost over his head, buried in a swirl of confusion as he starts to recognize that pieces that didn't seem to have anything to do with each other all add up to a very sinister sort of plotting and subterfuge happening behind the scenes, even around him and behind his back. So, Night Moves, very highly recommended film. I really enjoyed it. It's been kind of on my mind quite a bit since I've watched it. I do own the Warner Archive version. It was actually gifted to me a few years ago by my friend Jill Blake. We did a little Christmas time kind of group gift exchange, and Night Moves in the Warner Archive version made its way to me. I watched it, thought it was pretty cool, and didn't really give it a whole lot more thought after that. I just thought, well, it's good kind of 70s noir, neo-noir detective movie. But maybe it's just the way that the Criterion Collection packages their films. This has just one little special feature, which is actually also included here. It's called The Day of the Director. It's a little short bit that Arthur Penn is featured on and talks a little bit about his approach to filmmaking. And so you get that with this nice edition, but you also get another interview with Arthur Penn at different stages of his life. There's a wonderful commentary by Matthew Asprey Gear, who does a really excellent job digging into the movie and kind of explicating the things that are happening, the significance of Night Moves as far as getting the neo-noir subgenre launched and on its way. Of course, the Coen brothers and many others have kind of played with the noir conventions ever since, but Night Moves really has a very realistic claim of being kind of the original or the first of the neo-noir films to come out from the 1970s on forward. What else do we have in here? Well, this is a 4K Blu-ray set, so let's just take a look inside. You got the 2 discs there, you got this little booklet, and yeah, it's kind of like looking through a glass, the glass bottom boat, which is also, the image you get on the cover here. As a item on the shelf, this may not catch your attention very much. It's kind of murky and muddy and not even really clear what all's going on. But once you've seen the film, it totally makes sense. So here's the booklet inside if you want to just kind of see what is waiting for you if you decide to pick this one up. There's the essay, a little bit of illustration there. There's a little somewhat of an action shot, and yeah, pretty decent little package inside. There has been some controversy, some questions, maybe even some somewhat negative reviews of the 4K transfer. This is a darker image than what you're going to see on the Warner Archive Blu-ray. Now, if it's too dark, you can always brighten up your monitor a little bit. Criterion, of course, they always try to do, a faithful color grading. There are some people who think that maybe the Warner Archive brightened theirs up for a little bit more for modern consumption. So this one has more of a noirish look and feel to it. It definitely does get dark in some scenes where it's clearly not as bright or as colorful. I am not enough of a visual snob or expert to tell you which one I think is better, although I tend to trust Criterion's methodology, and they reference 1970s Technicolor print to we're striving for, and I assume that they accomplished that. But if you like a darker, richer, blacker type of image, this is going to have it for you. And you've got the Blu-ray and the 4K. So I feel like, you've got an excellent presentation, although there's nothing really wrong with the Warner Archive version. This is a new transfer, and I'm going to, trust that they've come up with a good one. But others may disagree, so I'm not going to try to be authoritative about it. There's also an interview with Jennifer Warren. She is kind of one of the lead females. I guess she's kind of the femme fatale type of role, because she kind of lures Harry Mosby into the situation that becomes pretty dangerous for him at a certain point in the film. So I think I've covered all of the major bits here. Yep, I think so. Yeah, an essay by critic Mark Harris. I kind of showed you the little pamphlet inside here. So this is a movie that I know a lot of people have been looking forward to. It's definitely got a pretty loyal fan base. So for all the reasons I've just explained, this is a highly recommended pick from the Criterion Collection. Night Moves. You will not hear Bob Seger on the soundtrack. I was waiting for it to come in over the outro there, but no. He recorded that song in 1976, a year after this movie came out. And I imagine that perhaps the title of the film and the images that it conjures up sparked something in Bob Seger's mind to write those lyrics and record that hit song, which also has been going through my mind quite a bit, even though Seger and Arthur Penn and Gene Hackman had nothing to do with each other. So, Night Moves.